I'm Sarah Reynolds, 34, and my entire family has just cut me out of their lives. The crime? I refused to use my savings to pay for my sister's mortgage after she lost her job. What started as a typical Sunday dinner at my parents' house ended with my own father telling me I was no longer welcome in their home until I did the right thing. 20 years of building my financial security, gone in an instant because I wouldn't sacrifice it for my irresponsible sister. Before I dive into this family nightmare, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy stories about family betrayal and standing your ground. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how karma eventually served my family the cold dish they deserved. Growing up in suburban Chicago, the dynamic between my sister Melissa and me was always crystal clear to everyone except my parents. Melissa, 2 years younger, was the golden child, beautiful, outgoing, and the star of every family gathering. I was the responsible one, the planner, the achiever who worked for everything I had. While our parents celebrated Melissa's C-plus grades with ice cream, my straight A's were met with, "That's what we expect from you, Sarah." This pattern continued through our teenage years. When Melissa crashed our dad's car at 16, they bought her a new one, claiming she needed the confidence boost. When I asked for help with college applications, I was told to figure it out yourself, because that's what responsible people do. The message was consistent. Melissa needed help. I needed to be self-sufficient. I worked 2 jobs to put myself through state college while Melissa attended a private university on our parents' dime. She changed majors 3 times, took 6 years to graduate with a communications degree, and moved back home afterward. Meanwhile, I graduated with honors in accounting, secured a job at a respected firm, and bought my first apartment by 25. The financial disparity in our treatment was staggering. When Melissa wanted to travel through Europe after college, our parents funded her 6-month adventure. When I needed emergency dental surgery during my 2nd year of college, I had to take out a personal loan because our parents claimed they just didn't have extra money right now. I later discovered they had purchased Melissa a designer wardrobe that same month. Family gatherings became exercises in restraint. Melissa would show up in expensive clothes, talking about her latest boyfriend or the job she had just quit because the environment wasn't nurturing enough. Our parents would hang on her every word while asking me nothing about my promotions or accomplishments. If I mentioned work success, my mother would quickly change the subject. "Not everyone is as fortunate as you, Sarah. Let's not make Melissa feel bad." By my late 20s, I had developed a protective emotional shell. I attended family events out of obligation, spoke little about my life, and left as soon as socially acceptable. My therapist called it emotional self-preservation. I called it survival. Then came the housing market crash of 2008. While I had saved carefully and invested conservatively, Melissa had jumped into the market with an interest-only loan on a house she couldn't afford. Our parents had co-signed her mortgage, despite my warnings about the risks. When the market collapsed, Melissa's house was suddenly underwater, worth far less than what she owed. Instead of accepting responsibility, Melissa cried to our parents that the bank had tricked her, despite the fact that I had specifically warned her about the terms of her loan. Our parents immediately stepped in, using a significant portion of their retirement savings to help with her mortgage payments. When I expressed concern about their financial future, my father snapped, "Family helps family, Sarah. Something you've never understood." The irony was crushing. I had been told to stand on my own 2 feet my entire life, while Melissa was continually rescued from the consequences of her choices. Yet somehow, I was the one who didn't understand family. The double standard was so blatant that even family friends began to notice and comment, which only made my parents double down on their defense of Melissa. By my 30th birthday, I had made peace with my role in the family. I focused on building my own life, creating a chosen family of close friends, and advancing my career. I had been promoted to senior manager at my firm and had a healthy investment portfolio alongside my regular savings. Financial security became my form of self-care, knowing that no matter what happened, I would never need to ask my family for help. Little did I know that my financial independence, the very thing I had been forced to develop, would soon become the target of my family's entitlement and ultimately lead to the most painful betrayal of my life. 3 months ago, the fragile piece in our family dynamic shattered. My phone rang at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, my mother's number flashing on the screen. She rarely called, especially on weeknights, so I answered immediately, thinking there must be an emergency. "Sarah, we need to talk about Melissa," she began without preamble. "She's lost her job at the marketing agency. The mortgage payment is due next week, and she can't make it." I sighed, unsurprised. This was Melissa's third job in 2 years. "That's tough, Mom. Has she applied for unemployment? Maybe looked into mortgage forbearance options?" "Don't be cold, Sarah. She's your sister. She needs help now, not financial advice." The familiar sting of being painted as the villain for suggesting practical solutions washed over me. "What exactly are you asking, Mom?" "Your father and I helped her last time, but we've depleted most of our savings. We know you've done well for yourself. You have that emergency fund you're always talking about." My stomach dropped. "Are you asking me to pay Melissa's mortgage?" "It would just be temporary," she rushed to say. "Until she finds another job. Maybe 3 months of payments? $7,500 should cover it." I nearly choked. "Mom, that's a significant amount of money. My emergency fund is for my emergencies, not for bailing out Melissa's poor financial choices." Her voice hardened. "This is what family does, Sarah. We help each other. Your sister would do the same for you." I laughed bitterly. "Would she? Melissa has never had to help me because I've never put myself in this position. I work hard, live within my means, and save for contingencies." "You've always been so selfish," my mother snapped. "Just because you've had opportunities." "Opportunities?" I interrupted, years of resentment bubbling to the surface. "I've had the same opportunities as Melissa. The difference is that I wasn't handed everything on a silver platter. I worked through college. I lived in a tiny studio to save money. I packed lunches while Melissa was eating out daily." "Your father and I are coming over tomorrow night," she said, ignoring my points entirely. "We'll discuss this as a family." 7 o'clock. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my apartment, shaking with anger and disbelief. The audacity of the request was staggering. I had been told my entire life to be self-sufficient, to never expect help, to stand on my own 2 feet. Now, suddenly, family meant emptying my hard-earned savings to bail out my sister's irresponsibility. The next evening, my parents arrived precisely at 7. My father's stern expression and my mother's tight-lipped smile told me they expected compliance. Melissa wasn't with them, of course not. She never had to face the uncomfortable conversations. They settled on my couch, declining offers of coffee or water. My father cleared his throat and launched into what sounded like a prepared speech. "Sarah, your mother told me about your reluctance to help your sister. I'm disappointed. We raised you better than this." I bit back a laugh. "Did you?" Because I distinctly remember being taught that I should never expect handouts, that I needed to be responsible for myself. "This isn't about handouts," my mother interjected. "This is about family taking care of family. Where was this family support when I needed dental surgery in college? Or when my car broke down and I had to take the bus for 6 months to save for repairs?" My father waved his hand dismissively. "That was different. You were always capable. Melissa is more sensitive." "More important, you mean?" I said quietly. My mother gasped. "How dare you? We love both our daughters equally. But you don't treat us equally, do you? You've bailed Melissa out her entire life while telling me to toughen up. Now you want me to follow your example and enable her irresponsibility." My father leaned forward, his expression hardening. "Enough excuses, Sarah. Will you help your sister or not? $7,500. That's all we're asking." I took a deep breath. "No, I won't pay her mortgage. I'm happy to help her update her resume or practice for interviews, but I won't give her money that I know will only reinforce the idea that she doesn't have to be responsible." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face crumpled, and my father's turned an alarming shade of red. "Then I don't think we have anything more to discuss," he said finally, standing up. "Until you reconsider your position and decide to be a real member of this family, you're not welcome in our home." My mother's eyes filled with tears, but she stood with my father. I never thought you could be so heartless, Sarah. Your own sister could lose her home. A home she never should have purchased, with a mortgage she couldn't afford, I replied, my voice steady despite the pain blooming in my chest. I'm not being heartless. I'm refusing to participate in a pattern that hurts all of us in the long run. They left without another word. As the door closed behind them, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. The mask had finally dropped. The conditional nature of my family's love was now explicit. My place in the family was dependent on my willingness to sacrifice my financial security for Melissa's benefit. Within days of my parents' ultimatum, my phone began buzzing with messages from extended family members. Aunt Carol wanted to know why I was abandoning my sister in her time of need. Uncle Steve suggested I had forgotten where I came from. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about my selfishness. It became clear that my parents had launched a coordinated campaign against me. Their narrative was simple and effective. Successful Sarah was hoarding her money while poor Melissa faced homelessness. No mention of the years of financial disparity, the constant bailouts Melissa had received, or the fact that I had offered help, just not financial help. The family WhatsApp group became a forum for passive-aggressive jabs. My cousin Jen posted about the importance of siblings supporting each other through tough times with a pointed #FamilyFirst#. Aunt Debbie shared an article about toxic individualism and how American culture overvalues financial success at the expense of family bonds. No one tagged me directly, but the target was obvious. My mother's sister, Aunt Linda, was the only one who reached out privately. I know there are two sides to every story, her message read. If you want to talk, I'm here. I considered opening up to her but decided against it. Experience had taught me that in my family, vulnerability was weaponized. The pressure campaign escalated when my grandmother called. At 85, she rarely got involved in family disputes, which made her intervention all the more painful. Sarah, honey, she began, her voice quavering. Your mother tells me you're refusing to help Melissa with her house payments. It's more complicated than that, Grandma, I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. Family is everything, Sarah. You know that. When your grandfather lost his job in 75, his brother covered our mortgage for 4 months. That's what family does. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her disappointment. Grandma, this isn't the same situation. Melissa has a pattern of financial irresponsibility that goes back years. Giving her money now won't solve the underlying problem. All I know is that your sister might lose her home, she said. And you have the means to prevent that, at least temporarily. I never thought I'd see the day when one of my granddaughters would turn her back on family. The conversation ended with her sighing heavily and saying she would pray for me to find compassion. I hung up and cried for an hour, the first time I'd allowed myself to break down since this all began. The following Sunday was my nephew Tyler's 8th birthday party. Melissa's son was the light of my life, and despite everything, I had planned to attend. I'd bought him the Lego set he'd been coveting for months and written him a special card. That morning, I received a text from Melissa. Mom and Dad think it's best if you don't come to Tyler's party today. We don't want family tension to ruin his special day. I'll tell him you weren't feeling well. The casual cruelty of using my nephew as leverage left me breathless. They knew exactly where to apply pressure to cause maximum pain. I spent Tyler's birthday alone in my apartment, staring at the wrapped Lego set and fighting waves of anger and grief. On Monday, I received an email from my father. The subject line read, "Your options." The body contained just 3 sentences. Your mother and I have considered the situation further. We're prepared to loan you the $7,500 if liquidity is the issue, though we know it isn't. Until this is resolved, please respect our wishes and keep your distance from family events. The absurdity of them offering to loan me money so I could give it to Melissa would have been laughable if it weren't so painful. They were so committed to maintaining the family dynamic, Melissa as the eternal victim, me as the cold-hearted success story, that they couldn't see how twisted their logic had become. The isolation took its toll. I had spent years creating emotional distance from my family, but being explicitly cast out was different. My productivity at work suffered. I found myself checking social media obsessively, wincing at each new family photo posted without me. Melissa shared pictures from a spontaneous family dinner at my parents' house, the kind of gathering I was now banned from attending. By week 3 of my excommunication, the WhatsApp group fell silent about the situation. No more pointed articles or passive-aggressive memes. I wondered if they'd given up or simply moved their discussions to a new group without me. Either way, the silence was almost worse than the active campaign. Then came the email from Melissa, the first direct communication since this began. I never asked them to pressure you like this. But since they have, and since you clearly don't care about my situation, I've found another solution. Don't worry about it anymore. I just hope someday you'll understand what being a sister really means. Her message was perfectly crafted to twist the knife, simultaneously playing the victim while claiming the moral high ground. The familiar dynamics were so predictable they were almost comforting. Almost. What I didn't know then was that Melissa's other solution would set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately expose decades of family secrets and force everyone to confront the true cost of our dysfunctional family system. For weeks into my family exile, I was deep into a spreadsheet at work when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I nearly declined it, assuming it was a spam call, but something made me answer. "Is this Sarah Reynolds?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Richard Winters. I'm Melissa's former boss at Apex Marketing." I sat up straighter, instantly alert. Her former boss? "What can I do for you, Mr. Winters?" "Please call me Rich. I'm calling because, well, this is awkward. Your sister has been telling people that she was laid off due to company downsizing. That's not accurate. She was terminated for cause." My stomach dropped. "I see. May I ask why you're telling me this?" He hesitated. "Normally, I wouldn't discuss personnel matters, but Melissa listed you as a character reference on an application to Meridian Partners, a company owned by a close friend of mine. She claimed you two run a successful side business together." I nearly dropped the phone. "What? We've never had any business together. I haven't even spoken to Melissa in weeks." "That's what I suspected," Rich sighed. "Look, I don't know what's going on between you two, but I felt I should warn you. She's using your professional reputation without your knowledge." After thanking him for the call, I sat at my desk, mind racing. This wasn't just about family drama anymore. Melissa was potentially damaging my professional credibility. I needed to understand the full scope of what she was doing. I called Meridian Partners and asked to speak with their HR department. After identifying myself, I clarified that I had no business relationship with Melissa and requested they remove me as a reference. The HR representative sounded uncomfortable but agreed to make a note in her file. Just out of curiosity, I asked before hanging up, what position was my sister applying for? "Senior financial analyst," the woman replied. I nearly laughed out loud. Melissa had never worked in finance. Her background was in marketing, and even there, she'd apparently been fired for cause. The audacity was breathtaking. That evening, I received a LinkedIn message from someone named Jake Turner. "Hi, Sarah. I'm a former colleague of Melissa's from Apex. I saw that Rich reached out to you. There's more you should know. Can we meet for coffee?" We arranged to meet at a cafe near my office the following day. Jake turned out to be a man in his early 30s with a serious expression and a folder tucked under his arm. "I worked with Melissa in the accounts department," he explained after we'd settled with our coffees. "What Rich probably didn't tell you is why she was fired." He opened the folder and slid a document across the table. It was an internal memo detailing an investigation into expense account fraud. Melissa's name was highlighted in several places. She was submitting fake receipts for client dinners that never happened, Jake said quietly. When confronted, she claimed it was common practice and that everyone did it. She specifically named me and 2 others as doing the same thing. I felt sick. "That triggered an investigation into all of you." Jake nodded. "We were all cleared, but it was humiliating. The thing is, this isn't the first time she's done something like this. At her previous job, she was also fired for financial impropriety, not laid off as she claimed." "How do you know about her previous job?" Small industry, Jake shrugged. People talk. But here's what concerns me now. He pulled out another paper, a screenshot of a GoFundMe page. The headline read, "Help save my home after unjust termination." I scanned the text, my horror growing with each line. Melissa had created a fundraising campaign claiming she was a single mother, true, who had been unjustly terminated in a corporate downsizing, false, and whose family had abandoned her in her time of need, wildly misleading. She was asking for $25,000 to save her home and provide stability for her son. The campaign included a photo of Melissa and Tyler looking forlorn on their front porch. It had already raised over $12,000 from 137 donors. "She's committing fraud," I whispered. Jake nodded grimly. "And using your family situation as leverage." Several colleagues donated because they felt bad about the heartless sister mentioned in her story. I put my head in my hands. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because it's wrong," Jake said simply. "And because she used my name and damaged my reputation. I don't want to see her do the same to anyone else." He hesitated. "There's one more thing. She's telling people that your parents are elderly and in poor health, struggling to help her while managing their own medical bills." I looked up sharply. "My parents are in their early 60s and in excellent health. My dad still runs marathons." I thought as much. Jake gathered his documents. "I'm not telling you what to do with this information. I just thought you should know." After Jake left, I remained at the cafe, trying to process everything. Melissa wasn't just manipulating our family. She was defrauding strangers based on lies that painted her as a victim and me as a villain. And she was potentially damaging my professional reputation in the process. For a moment, I considered calling my parents to tell them what I'd learned. But I knew exactly how that conversation would go. They would defend Melissa, claim Jake had some vendetta against her, and accuse me of trying to damage her reputation out of spite. Instead, I made two decisions. First, I would document everything I'd learned, creating a paper trail in case Melissa's lies ever threatened my career or reputation more directly. Second, I would continue my silence with my family, allowing them to believe whatever narrative made them comfortable. What I didn't realize was that my quiet documentation would soon become critical evidence in a much larger reckoning. I know we're at a turning point in this story, and I can see many of you are probably wondering what I did next with this bombshell information. Before I continue, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever discovered someone close to you is living a double life? How did you handle it? And if you're enjoying this journey through my family drama, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about family dynamics, personal boundaries, and yes, sometimes the sweet taste of karma. I promise what happens next will completely change how you think about family loyalty. 2 days after meeting with Jake, I received a certified letter that would change everything. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize, requesting my presence at a reading of my great-aunt Elaine's will. I barely remembered great-aunt Elaine, my grandmother's sister who had moved to Arizona decades ago. I'd met her perhaps 3 times in my life, most recently at a family reunion 7 years earlier. The reading was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I arranged to take the day off work and drove to the address provided, a small but prestigious law office in downtown Chicago. To my surprise, I was the only family member present. The others were notified but declined to attend, explained Mr. Harrington, a silver-haired attorney with kind eyes. They'll receive written notification of any relevant provisions. I frowned. I'm confused. I barely knew my great-aunt. Why would I be in her will? Mr. Harrington smiled. Elaine was a remarkable woman who valued certain qualities above others. She kept detailed records of all family members and their activities over the years. He opened a thick folder. Now, shall we proceed? What followed was surreal. Great-aunt Elaine had left me the bulk of her estate, a condo in Scottsdale, investments worth approximately $1.2 million, and a collection of antique jewelry. The only condition was that I donate $50,000 to a women's financial literacy nonprofit of my choosing. This can't be right, I stammered. What about my parents? My sister? My grandmother? There are small bequests to other family members, Mr. Harrington acknowledged. Your grandmother receives Elaine's personal effects and family photographs. Your parents each receive $10,000. Your sister is not mentioned in the will. I sat in shocked silence as Mr. Harrington explained the details. Great-Aunt Elaine had no children of her own. She had built her wealth through shrewd real estate investments after being widowed in her 40s. According to a letter she had left for me, she had been quietly following my career and financial decisions for years, approving of my self-sufficiency and responsible choices. She revised her will 3 years ago, Mr. Harrington noted. She was particularly impressed by your decision to help fund a scholarship at your alma mater rather than buying a more expensive car as you could have afforded. I remembered that decision, but had no idea anyone in my family had noticed or cared. I certainly hadn't told Great-Aunt Elaine about it. She had her ways of keeping informed. Mr. Harrington smiled, seeing my confusion. Elaine valued financial responsibility above most other traits. She believed that those who demonstrated it should be encouraged. As I drove home, my mind was a whirlwind. I was now financially secure beyond anything I had imagined at this stage of my life. I could pay off my mortgage, take a sabbatical, even start my own business if I wanted to. The possibilities were dizzying. But I also knew what was coming. As soon as my family learned about the inheritance, the pressure would intensify exponentially. If they thought I should give Melissa $7,500 when that represented a significant portion of my emergency fund, what would they expect now that I had inherited over $1 million? Sure enough, my phone rang that evening. It was my mother, her voice tight with controlled anger. "We received a letter today about Elaine's will," she said without preamble. "Is it true? She left you everything." "Not everything," I replied carefully. "You and Dad received bequests as well. And Grandma gets all the family heirlooms and photographs." "Don't be obtuse, Sarah. You know what I mean. How could she leave you over $1 million and practically nothing to the rest of us? Did you keep in touch with her secretly? Influence her somehow?" The accusation stung. "I was as surprised as you are, Mom. I hadn't spoken to her since the family reunion years ago." "This doesn't make any sense," my mother insisted. Elaine was family-oriented. She wouldn't have played favorites like this. I bit back a laugh at the irony of my mother complaining about favoritism. According to her lawyer, she had been following all our lives from a distance. She valued financial responsibility and wanted to reward it. There was a long silence. "Well," my mother finally said, her voice brittle, "I suppose congratulations are in order. Now there's no excuse for not helping your sister." And there it was, exactly as I had anticipated. "Mom, this doesn't change my position. Giving Melissa money won't solve her underlying issues. She's about to lose her house, Sarah. Tyler will have to change schools. How can you be so heartless when you're now sitting on a fortune you did nothing to earn?" The conversation deteriorated from there. My mother hung up after telling me that my great-aunt would be ashamed of how I was using her gift. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the same furniture I'd had for years, feeling like I'd entered a bizarre alternate reality where receiving an unexpected inheritance made me the villain. The next morning, my father called. His approach was different, less emotional, more strategic. "Your mother told me about your conversation," he began. "I think we got off on the wrong foot. This inheritance is wonderful news, Sarah. You've always been smart with money, and I'm sure you'll make good decisions." I waited for the pivot, knowing it was coming. "That said, this does present an opportunity to resolve the current family situation. Melissa's mortgage is $2,500 a month. If you covered it for a year, just $30,000 out of your windfall, it would give her time to get back on her feet. That's less than 3% of what you've inherited." "Dad," I said quietly, "do you know why Melissa lost her job? She was laid off in a company restructuring." "You know that?" "That's not true. She was fired for for expense account fraud. And this wasn't the first time." There was a pause. "Where did you hear that?" "From her former boss and a colleague. She's also created a fraudulent GoFundMe campaign claiming she's a victim of corporate downsizing and family abandonment. She's raised over $12,000 by lying." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Melissa wouldn't do that." "Dad, I've seen the documentation. There's no misunderstanding. Well, he said finally, even if there were issues at work, that doesn't change the fact that she's your sister and she needs help. I closed my eyes, realizing that nothing I could say would penetrate the armor of their perception. I'm sorry, Dad. My answer is still no. The next salvo came from an unexpected direction. My cousin Emma, who had always been friendly but not particularly close, reached out to suggest lunch. Curious, I agreed to meet her at a restaurant halfway between our offices. I heard about Aunt Elaine's will, she said after we'd ordered. And about the family drama with Melissa. I tensed, preparing for another lecture about family obligation. I think you're doing the right thing, Emma continued, surprising me. Standing your ground, I mean. Melissa has been manipulating the family for years. I stared at her, speechless. Emma smiled sadly. Not everyone buys into the golden child narrative, you know. Some of us have seen through it for years. We just kept quiet because it was easier. We? I asked. A few of the cousins. Uncle Steve's kids. Aunt Linda, though she'd never say it openly. Emma shrugged. The thing is, this inheritance has exposed the dynamics in a way that can't be ignored anymore. People are talking. About what? About how Melissa has always been bailed out while you've been left to fend for yourself. About how unfair it is that you're being vilified for not handing over your money. About whether Aunt Elaine knew more about the family dynamics than anyone realized. I felt a wave of vindication, quickly followed by wariness. Why are you telling me this? Emma looked me straight in the eyes. Because I think you should know you're not alone. And because I think you should know that Melissa is planning something. I overheard her on the phone with Uncle Robert, talking about contesting the will. On what grounds? I asked, alarmed. Undue influence, apparently. She's claiming you must have manipulated Aunt Elaine because there's no other explanation for why she would favor you so dramatically. The absurdity of the accusation would have been laughable if it weren't so potentially damaging. I barely knew Aunt Elaine. I know that. But Melissa is desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. Emma hesitated. There's something else you should know. Your parents have been helping Melissa more than anyone realizes. They remortgaged their house last year to pay off her credit card debt, over $75,000 worth. I felt the blood drain from my face. They did what? They didn't tell anyone, but Dad's on the local bank board, and he saw the paperwork come through. They took out a new 30-year mortgage on a house that was almost paid off. At their age, Sarah. The implications were staggering. My parents were in their 60s, approaching retirement age. A new 30-year mortgage would follow them into their 90s. Why would they do that? I whispered. Emma gave me a sad smile. For the same reason they've always cleaned up Melissa's messes. They can't help themselves. As I drove home from lunch, I realized that the inheritance had done more than change my financial situation. It had cast the family dynamics into sharp relief, making the patterns too obvious to ignore. And it had apparently prompted some family members to finally speak up about what they'd observed for years. What I didn't know then was that Melissa's plan to contest the will would lead to revelations that would shake our family to its core, revelations that even I, with all my suspicions about my sister, never could have anticipated. 3 days after my lunch with Emma, I received another certified letter, this time from a different law firm representing my sister in a challenge to Great Aunt Elaine's will. The letter alleged that I had exerted undue influence on an elderly relative with diminished capacity and demanded that the will be set aside in favor of more equitable distribution among family members. I immediately called Mr. Harrington, who seemed unsurprised by the development. Elaine anticipated this possibility, he said calmly. She was quite thorough. What do you mean? She had herself evaluated by 2 independent neurologists annually for the last 5 years of her life to document her mental competence. She also kept meticulous records of all interactions with family members, including dates, times, and the nature of the contact. And she recorded her reasons for her bequest decisions in a notarized letter that's admissible in probate court. So Melissa's challenge has no merit whatsoever, Mr. Harrington finished. But it will delay distribution of the estate and cost everyone money and aggravation. Would you like me to handle the response, or do you have your own attorney? I authorized Mr. Harrington to represent me, then sat at my kitchen table, trembling with anger. Melissa wasn't just asking me for money anymore. She was actively trying to take what wasn't hers through legal means. The escalation was breathtaking. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "We've just heard about Melissa's legal action. We tried to talk her out of it, but she's determined. Please consider settling with her to avoid family devastation." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The next morning, I woke to an email from Jake, Melissa's former colleague. The subject line read, "You should see this." Attached was a screenshot of a Facebook post from Melissa. "When family betrays you and hoards wealth that should be shared, sometimes you have to take legal action. Standing up for what's right even when it's hard. Hashtag family justice, hashtag fighting for fairness." The post had dozens of sympathetic comments and reactions. Melissa was openly rallying public support for her legal battle against me, positioning herself as David to my Goliath. I forwarded the screenshot to Mr. Harrington, who advised me to document but not engage. "Social media theatrics won't affect the legal outcome," he assured me. That afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. It was a reporter from a local news website wanting to hear my side of the inheritance dispute that was tearing apart my family. Somehow, Melissa had gotten the story into the media. I declined to comment and immediately called Mr. Harrington again. "This is getting out of hand," I told him. "She's trying to create public pressure." "It won't work legally," he said firmly. "But I understand this is difficult personally. Would you like me to issue a statement on your behalf?" I declined. Engaging would only fuel the fire. The next day, I opened my email to find a message from an unexpected source, Aunt Linda, my mother's sister. "Sarah, what's happening is wrong. I can't stay silent anymore. There's something you need to know about your great-aunt Elaine and your sister. Can we meet in person? This isn't something I want to put in writing." Intrigued and apprehensive, I arranged to meet Aunt Linda at a quiet cafe far from our usual family haunts. She arrived looking nervous, clutching a manila envelope. "Thank you for coming," she said, sliding into the booth. "This isn't easy, but after seeing how Melissa is behaving, I feel you deserve to know the truth." She opened the envelope and removed a stack of letters, actual handwritten letters on yellowed paper. "These are from Elaine to your grandmother, my mother, over the years. Mother kept them all. When she moved to assisted living last year, I helped pack her things and found these. I've been holding on to them, unsure what to do." I gently took the first letter. It was dated June 1991, when I would have been about 1 year old. "Read from the third paragraph," Aunt Linda suggested. I skimmed down and began reading. "Margaret, I cannot in good conscience continue to ignore what I witnessed during my visit. The way Helen and David treat little Sarah compared to Melissa is troubling. When Sarah cried, Helen seemed annoyed, but she jumps at Melissa's slightest whimper. I mentioned this, and Helen became defensive, claiming I'm imagining things. I fear this differential treatment will only worsen as the girls grow. Please talk to your daughter before lasting damage is done." I looked up at Aunt Linda, stunned. "Great-Aunt Elaine noticed the favoritism when I was a baby?" Aunt Linda nodded grimly. "Keep reading. There are more letters spanning years. Elaine was deeply concerned about you, and she tried repeatedly to intervene." I spent the next hour reading through the correspondence. Great-Aunt Elaine had documented instance after instance of my parents' preferential treatment of Melissa, expressing her concerns to my grandmother. In a letter from 2001, when I would have been 11, she wrote, "Margaret, I'm alarmed by what I observed at Thanksgiving. Sarah received straight A's on her report card and was told 'good job' with barely a glance, while Melissa's B- in art was celebrated with ice cream and excessive praise. When I suggested to Helen that Sarah deserved equal recognition, she accused me of interfering. I fear Sarah is internalizing the message that her achievements are expected while Melissa's mediocrity is exceptional. This is damaging, Margaret." The letters continued, documenting Great-Aunt Elaine's growing concern and my grandmother's apparent dismissal of the issue. In the later letters, Elaine expressed resignation that nothing would change, but stated her intention to make things right in my own way someday. I looked up at Aunt Linda, tears streaming down my face. She saw it. All those years, she saw it, and she tried to help. Aunt Linda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She did. And when no one would listen, she made her own plan. That inheritance wasn't random, Sarah. It was Elaine's way of balancing the scales after a lifetime of witnessing the injustice. Did my parents know she felt this way? Helen knew Elaine disapproved of how they parented, but I don't think she realized the extent of Elaine's documentation or her plan regarding her estate. None of us did. I wiped my eyes. Why are you showing me these now? Aunt Linda sighed deeply. Because Melissa is trying to paint you as the manipulative one, when the truth is exactly the opposite. And because... She hesitated. There's one more letter you should see. She handed me a final envelope, this one newer than the others. This came to me a month before Elaine died. She asked me to keep it private unless it became necessary to share it. I think that time has come. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter addressed to whom it may concern and signed by Great-Aunt Elaine. To whom it may concern, I, Elaine Margaret Wilson, being of sound mind, wish to document an incident that occurred during my visit to Chicago in June 2018. My great-niece, Melissa Reynolds, approached me privately and asked for a loan of $25,000 to address what she described as temporary financial difficulties. When I inquired about the nature of these difficulties, she became evasive. I declined her request, suggesting she seek financial counseling instead. Melissa became angry and suggested that as a childless widow with substantial means, I had an obligation to help family members in need. When I remained firm in my refusal, she implied that at my age, I wouldn't need my money much longer anyway, and that I was being selfish for hoarding it. I am recording this incident because I believe it reveals Melissa's true character and attitude toward family resources. Should she ever contest my will or question my decisions regarding the distribution of my estate, I want it known that her interest in my finances predated my death and was expressed in a manner I found both disrespectful and mercenary. I have chosen to leave the bulk of my estate to Sarah Reynolds because I have observed, over many years, her financial responsibility, work ethic, and generosity of spirit despite receiving less family support than her sister. My decision is not made lightly or without consideration, but with full awareness of the family dynamics at play. I sat back, speechless. Great-Aunt Elaine hadn't just been a distant observer, she had direct experience with Melissa's entitlement. Mr. Harrington has the original of this letter, Aunt Linda said quietly. Elaine sent it to him as well. But I thought you should see it personally. Does Melissa know about this letter? I don't believe so. But if she pursues this legal challenge, she will. Aunt Linda gathered the letters and returned them to the envelope. You should have these. They belong to you now. As I drove home, my mind reeled with revelations. Great-Aunt Elaine had seen the truth of my family dynamics for decades. She had tried to intervene and been rebuffed. And finally, she had taken the only action left to her, using her estate to provide the recognition and support my parents had withheld. When I arrived home, there was a voicemail from my father. His voice was tight with controlled anger. Sarah, your mother, and I just heard about you meeting with Aunt Linda. Whatever she told you, remember that family matters should remain private. Call me back immediately. Instead of calling my father, I called Mr. Harrington. I'd like to proceed with a formal response to Melissa's challenge, I told him. And I have additional documentation that might be relevant. Excellent, he replied. And Sarah? For what it's worth, Elaine would be proud of you for standing your ground. The next morning, I received a text from my cousin Emma. Heads up, family emergency meeting called for tomorrow night at your parents' house. Melissa's going to be there with her lawyer. They're expecting you to show up. I texted back, I won't be attending. My lawyer will handle all communication. Within minutes, my phone exploded with messages from various family members, alternating between pleas to work things out as a family and accusations that I was making things worse by involving lawyers. The irony that Melissa had initiated the legal action seemed lost on everyone. I forwarded all messages to Mr. Harrington and turned off my phone. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a strange sense of calm. The truth was finally coming to light, and I no longer felt obligated to protect a family system that had never protected me. What I didn't realize was that the meeting I declined to attend would lead to the most dramatic confrontation yet, one that would finally shatter the carefully constructed family narrative once and for all. 3 days after the family emergency meeting I'd skipped, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. It was my grandmother, accompanied by Aunt Linda. "We need to talk, Sarah," my grandmother said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. "May we come in?" Stunned to see her at my door, I stepped aside to let them enter. My grandmother hadn't left her assisted living facility for a social visit in over a year. "I've made a terrible mistake," she said once we were seated in my living room. "For years, I ignored what Elaine tried to tell me about how you were being treated. I dismissed her concerns because it was easier than confronting Helen and David. I failed you, and I'm deeply sorry." I struggled to find words, emotion closing my throat. The family meeting was illuminating, Aunt Linda explained. "Melissa's lawyer presented their case for contesting the will. Then your lawyer countered with Elaine's documentation, including her records of trying to intervene on your behalf throughout your childhood. Your mother denied everything," my grandmother continued. "But then your father, of all people, spoke up. He admitted there had always been different standards for you and Melissa. He said they'd convinced themselves it was because you were stronger and didn't need the same support, but hearing it laid out chronologically by a dispassionate third party made him realize how it must have looked to you." I felt tears welling. Dad admitted that. Aunt Linda nodded. It was quite a moment. Then Melissa made things worse by claiming she deserved the inheritance more because she needed it while you were already financially stable. She actually said, "It's not fair that Sarah gets rewarded for having an easy life." My grandmother's expression hardened. That's when I'd had enough. "I told everyone about the time I drove you to the emergency room with that awful tooth infection in college because your parents were on vacation with Melissa and wouldn't come home. How you were trying not to cry while filling out forms asking how you'd pay the bill. How you worked double shifts with your jaw still swollen to make up for the lost study time." I remembered that day vividly. The searing pain, the fear about the cost, the loneliness of facing it without family support. "The room got very quiet," Aunt Linda said. "Then your cousin Ryan spoke up about how you helped him apply for scholarships when no one else would. And Emma mentioned how you stayed with her for a week after her surgery when Melissa canceled on her at the last minute." One by one, family members started sharing stories about your kindness and responsibility, my grandmother said, her eyes shining with tears. It was as if a dam had broken. And through it all, Melissa kept interrupting, trying to make it about her, until her own lawyer told her to stop talking. I was speechless, trying to absorb what they were describing, a family meeting that had somehow turned into a defense of me in my absence. When everything was laid bare, Aunt Linda continued, Melissa's lawyer actually advised her to withdraw the challenge to the will. He said it had no merit and pursuing it would only waste her money. Did she agree? I asked. My grandmother and Aunt Linda exchanged glances. Not exactly, my grandmother said. She had what can only be described as a tantrum. She accused everyone of turning against her and stormed out. Your parents followed her, Aunt Linda added. But the rest of us stayed to talk. Sarah, there's been a fundamental shift in the family. People are finally acknowledging the pattern that's existed for decades. I took a deep breath, still processing. What happens now? That's partly why we're here, my grandmother said, reaching for my hand. I can't undo the past or make up for the years I looked the other way. But I can support you now. Whatever you decide to do, whether you want to attempt reconciliation with your parents or maintain distance, I'm on your side. Aunt Linda nodded in agreement. You're not alone anymore, Sarah. And neither is Melissa, though she may not appreciate the kind of support she actually needs. What do you mean? I asked. After the meeting, your father called me, my grandmother explained. He and your mother have realized they've enabled Melissa's financial irresponsibility for years. They've decided not to bail her out of her mortgage situation. I felt a jolt of surprise. Really? That's unexpected. They're beginning to understand that their help hasn't actually helped, Aunt Linda said. It's a start, at least. The three of us talked for hours. For the first time, I felt truly heard by family members who had known me my entire life. The validation was both healing and bittersweet. Why had it taken an inheritance dispute to bring these truths to light? In the weeks that followed, the the family landscape shifted dramatically. Melissa, faced with the withdrawal of financial support from our parents and the collapse of her legal challenge, was forced to sell her house. She moved into a more affordable apartment and, surprisingly, found a job at a small marketing firm where a friend worked. My parents reached out tentatively, suggesting family counseling. After careful consideration, I agreed to attend a session with a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. It was painful and awkward, but it was a beginning. The inheritance from Great Aunt Elaine was eventually distributed as she had intended. True to her wishes, I donated $50,000 to a women's financial literacy nonprofit. I also established a college fund for my nephew Tyler, knowing that regardless of the issues with his mother, he deserved educational opportunities. Most surprisingly, I found myself becoming closer to extended family members who had witnessed the dysfunction but never known how to address it. Cousins, aunts, and uncles reached out individually, building relationships independent of the core family drama. 6 months after Great Aunt Elaine's will was read, I received an email from Melissa, the first direct communication since the inheritance dispute began. I've been in therapy. My counselor suggested I write to you as part of my recovery process. I'm not ready to apologize for everything yet, but I'm starting to see patterns in my behavior that aren't healthy. I miss Tyler having a relationship with his aunt. When you're ready, maybe we could meet for coffee. It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement of sorts. I replied that I would consider meeting after some more time had passed. As for my parents, our relationship remains complicated. We're talking again, cautiously. They've admitted to the favoritism that defined my childhood and early adulthood, though they still sometimes slip into old patterns. True healing will take time, if it's possible at all. The most unexpected outcome of this whole ordeal has been my discovery of Great Aunt Elaine, a woman I barely knew in life, but who saw me clearly from a distance. Through her letters and her final gift, she validated my experience and changed the trajectory of my life. I only wish I could thank her. Last week, I visited her grave in Arizona. I brought white roses. Aunt Linda told me they were her favorite and sat beside the headstone, telling her everything that had happened since her passing. How her decision had forced long overdue conversations. How family secrets had finally been exposed to light. How patterns of favoritism and enabling were slowly, painfully being addressed. You started a reckoning, I told her grave. You saw what was happening, and when no one would listen, you found another way to speak the truth. I promise to use your gift wisely. As I stood to leave, I noticed an elderly woman placing flowers at a nearby grave. She smiled at me. Were you close to Elaine? She asked. Not in life, I admitted. But I'm learning how much she cared for me from a distance. The woman nodded. Elaine was like that, observant, strategic. She didn't confront problems head-on. She played the long game. I smiled, recognizing the truth in her description. Great Aunt Elaine had indeed played the long game. And in doing so, she had finally broken a dysfunctional family pattern that had persisted for decades. My parents disowned me for refusing to pay my sister's mortgage. They never imagined that decision would lead to exposing decades of family secrets and ultimately begin a painful but necessary healing process. Sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about protecting yourself, it's about breaking cycles that harm everyone involved. I've learned that family isn't just about blood or obligation. It's about mutual respect, fairness, and supporting each other's growth rather than enabling destructive patterns. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for family is to say no to what hurts everyone in the long run. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this journey I've shared. Have you ever had to stand your ground with family, even when it was painful? Did it lead to unexpected consequences or revelations? Please share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about family dynamics, personal boundaries, and the sometimes difficult path to healthier relationships. Thank you so much for coming along on this journey with me. Your support means more than you know. Until next time, remember that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most necessary growth.